Therefore, we must find a way to reconcile these difficult concepts. The concept of transparency, the concept of government that sometimes needs secrecy, the concept of corruption that may be very well supported by the opacity of the government if there is no transparency. And finally, to try to find a place of the media in all of this mess. Obviously, there are different levels and types of corruption, and usually the media are not reporting on all of them. The media tends to focus, because of its effect on the society and because it's a good story, mainly on the high-level corruption, the political corruption. And this is understandable. It involves high-level politicians. High-level politicians are interesting for the public. This is a story that sells. There are also other types of corruption that are important to note here. The administrative corruption, sometimes overlooked, is also quite dangerous. It is the corruption that people meet every day. It is the corruption that people could meet in a hospital, on the highway, when they enter the building of the local government. In fact, people will very rarely meet in person a minister, and they will very rarely meet in person high-level corruption. So if there is a personal experience with corruption, this personal experience is likely to be at low-level corruption. Does that mean that the high-level corruption does not destroy public trust, but the low-level corruption does? There are different researches done with this respect, and there is no uniform agreed answer on that. It is clear, however, that the administrative corruption often overlooked by the media in their search of grand corruption stories is also quite important and is also quite destructive for the society. It may actually involve very substantial financial resource. The third type of corruption that is sometimes overlooked by the media, not by every media, not always, is the so-called state capture. It is the situation where a certain group of people or a certain group of businesses is actually, by the use of the legitimate state instruments, taking over the state and starts to use it in their own interests, not in the interests of the public at large. In fact, this is a particularly problematic form of corruption, because the state capture, when there is state capture, you have laws that are made for the benefit of a particular small group of people. And the public servants have to implement the laws. So in fact, if you are implementing the laws, you are getting involved in corruption. And if you go against the laws, well, everybody knows what happens. So these different forms of corruption have to be addressed in a different way if we want to expose them and if we want to cause some meaningful social effect. The other thing is that there are two different points of view through which we could look at corruption, through different angles. Very often you would see from politicians that the corruption is a two-sided deal. It has become almost a cliché. Well, it's true. It is a two-sided deal. And even if at a certain point we manage to clean out the public service completely, if the business people continue approaching public servants with offers of money, somebody inevitably will start taking a gain. So this problem also has to be addressed. It would be very important to look at corruption as a phenomenon where somebody is also giving money. Somebody is actually trying to bribe the public service. Somebody is trying to do something bad to the society. And not to turn a blind eye on it, not to pretend as if things doesn't happen, not to pretend as if this is a part of the normal business practice. It isn't, it shouldn't be. A couple of words on the effects of corruption with a particular emphasis on the issue of trust. We look at corruption and we see a public service, a state that is not doing what it has to. This has very direct effects on the economy of the country, because the unreliable public service is in fact reducing the opportunities for the budget of the country to grow. It is reducing the speed of development inevitably, though interestingly in the 90s, at the beginning of the 90s, the end of the 80s, there was a school of thought, particularly consisting of high-level economists, who was regarding corruption as something acceptable, particularly with regard to the growth. You could still see remains of this point of view in statements such as, well, the bureaucracy is so big that we have to give money in order for something to happen. You know, it's a part of the rationalization of corruption. There are institutional effects of corruption. Public service that is corrupt is less efficient, it's less effective. This is a particularly serious problem because the low level of effectiveness of the institutions may itself support corruption and thus cause a vicious circle in which the institutions are becoming weaker and weaker and corruption larger and larger. And of course there are strong effects for the society and for the politics. The moment when money is not going where it's meant to be, you have a growing inequality in the society and you have growing discontent. And you have lower levels of public trust. For the politics, it's quite clear that at a certain moment, if you get involved in corruption, your political parties may get contaminated too. And this is not a particularly good thing to happen. Well, after we had a look at those issues, we could now focus on the different approaches through which governments are trying to fight corruption. And we could try to think of ways to see where's the media in all this. The first approach, which is most widely used in the moment, is the one that is focusing on institutions. This approach sees every institution strengthening measure, regards every institutional strengthening measure as a corruption prevention measure, which leads to a very natural conclusion. Every effort to support the institutions could be regarded as a corruption prevention measure in this context. Because if actually the things that we do are weakening our institutions and their ability to address corruption, we are deepening the problem. We are depriving the institutions of the tools they would need in order to address the issues of corruption. This sounds a bit counterintuitive because we have been listening too often and we have been listening too strongly voiced the opinion that the journalist should always be critical, that the media should always be in opposition to the government.